What is the distinction between bad habits and addiction? Is a distinction I have been, I don't know if avoiding is too strong of a word, but it's definitely one that I've been backburnering for some time for a couple of reasons. It's a bit of a hot topic. Opinions vary. Passions rise. I definitely don't want to upset anyone. Well, the other part is that as a coach, I'm not really qualified to treat addiction. That's not to say that addiction can't be part of a conversation that's a coaching conversation, but if the goal is to treat addiction, that's not really my lane. That said, I am, by many definitions, a recovering addict. I tend to prefer the word abuser when it comes to chemical usage. I don't feel like my usage reached a point where I would qualify it as addiction, but this is a subjective conversation, and frankly, some of this is subjective, which is why I think that's kind of the undergirding of my concerns around talking about it. But let's get dangerous. So let's start with some dictionary definitions, and I'm gonna borrow my friend the Oxford Dictionary for a couple of these. Let's start with bad habit. Now, this was actually a surprise to me. I wasn't actually able to find a reputable dictionary that wanted to define bad habits. Instead, I found a definition of habits. So we'll start there, and then we'll work our way over to addiction. So Oxford Dictionary calls a habit a thing that you do often and almost without thinking, especially something that is hard to stop doing. So that neatly trammels up good and bad habits. It just doesn't really qualify the difference between the two. So let's leave that as a bit of an open ticket. I think we can all kind of assume our own subjective experience with what we consider our good and our bad habits, and habits can actually toggle between the two. The separation is then what separates just a general habit, good or bad, from addiction. Now, back to Oxford, addiction is the condition of being unable to stop using or doing something as a habit, especially something harmful. Unable to stop using. This gets closer to my definition, and I'll give you my definition in a second here, but I want to just touch on one other definition without getting too far down this road. I don't know, maybe. Dictionary.com. The state of being compulsively committed to a habit or practice, or to something that is psychologically or physically habit-forming, as narcotics, to such an extent that its cessation causes severe trauma. Now, this is closer to my relationship with the definition of addiction. The key phrase that I would add on to that is that it would be something around the result of which is so awful that no person in their right mind would wish it upon themselves. Right? The net effects of addictive behavior are so bad that no rational thinker would say, well, this is really what I want from my habits. I mean, it's safe to say from these from these definitions that addiction arises from our understanding of how we define habits. But at what point do we declare a habit good or bad, I think is sort of irrelevant. The crossover point is when a habit, whether we're calling it good or whether we're calling it bad, has such a negative net effect on the totality of a person's life that there's no way could you rewind the clock to the time before they started the behavior, and if you told them this is what's going to happen from it, there's no person that would say, well, that's what I really want. I really want to be in that place. I have a last thought about this, and that is that it's quite common in standard parlance to refer to everyday habits as addictions. Oh, I'm addicted to Netflix. I'm addicted to exercise. I'm addicted to my spouse. I'm not going to try to claim that one cannot achieve that level of addictive behavior to those outlets or any other ones. Certainly, anything could become so troublesome in our lives that it's creating a circumstance for us that we would never in our right minds want. I could exercise so desperately that I'm actually causing joint pain and damage and recovery issues, and there are a whole host of problems that could come from overtraining. I don't want to try to define what that is for any one person, and to that extent, Netflix. I could maybe be watching it to the exclusion of having social interactions or leaving my home, and nobody's going to want that for their lives, and maybe my marriage has become toxic. But I think when most people are using the term addiction to their habits, they're being clever and cute. But to people in the category that have recovered from difficult addictions or abuses, as I prefer to call it, that characterization fails to grasp what's actually going on in any case where somebody's addicted. And so, from a coaching perspective, the question that is worth trying to understand is, is what you're experiencing a habit that maybe has some elements that you don't prefer, or is it an addiction?